Welcome back. Thanks for rolling podcast. I am Jeff. I am here with my co-host Pat. How are you?
Doing well, Jeff. How are you?
Second episode we're recording in the day, which
back
is
to back.
Unusual for us. And via Zoom, we have a special guest, the Grappling Doctor.
Live via satellite.
Via satellite, that's right. Why don't you introduce yourself, special guest?
Appreciate it, guys. Happy to be on here. My name is Dr. Kenny Gu. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I also am an athletic trainer and a strength coach. What I do is I try to take all my experiences in the sports medicine world, in the world of physical rehabilitation and strength and performance, and deliver it to the grappling community, which I believe is a little underserved in all three of those aspects, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I think we got connected through a mutual friend, right? Ex-training partner, old training partner of yours.
Yeah.
Friend of the pod. I like to call him Chainsaw Mike, but we've also gone by Big Fight Mike or
Chainsaw Mike.
Chainsaw and Kimono, or Chainsaws and Kimono. So he's got many names, right? Many
The
names.
most recurring guest on this podcast.
That's right. He's been on the podcast 2 or 3 times, maybe.
There you go.
So you guys used to train together, right?
Yep. We used to train at Gracie Baja Boston. When I just started over there, I was still a white belt then. He was well on his way in his purple belt. And you know how it is, so give you guys some background. I used to be a wrestler, right? So wrestled, throughout my life and in high school. So I had that grappling experience. When you come into jiu-jitsu with that background, you got to get humbled, right? So, I was humbled at Gracie Baja Boston. And Mike was sometimes doing some of the humbling over there. But since then, I believe he's kind of been training a little closer in his area. I haven't seen him since, but I was training at Gracie Baja Boston for about 2 to 3 years, and while finishing up my education in Boston. And then since then, I've moved back to New York. I'm actually located in Brooklyn now, and I train at the Dojo, which is a Cobra affiliate. I think one of the few and only Cobra affiliates in the East Coast, actually.
Okay.
So
okay, I was going to just ask you that part. So take us through. We're going to do 2 tracks with you, I guess, right? Because I'm interested in kind of knowing your educational track. But let's stay with the grappling martial arts side. So.
Yeah.
Wrestled when you were younger. Give us that kind of journey. Like we always like to hear kind of how people ended up in the jiu-jitsu world, right?
For sure. Yeah. So, my first sport actually growing up was swimming. Well, I mean, as a kid, you do all, you play baseball, you do soccer and rec league and that. But like the first sport where I was actually relatively competitive was in swimming. But I had a younger brother he's phenomenal at swimming. He swims D1 in college. He swam at Boston University. And, I never really liked swimming like that. I was, it's something that with the endless laps, it gets numbing. I needed that like stimulation. And then in 8th grade, I got into football. I had this massive growth spurt. I grew from like 5'7" to 6'1". Became really, really lanky. I filled out my frame a little bit. And then I was like, this swimming is like when football season ended going into the winter, I was like, yeah, I can't do swimming anymore. I was dreading going back to the pool. And I was a little scared to talk to my coach at the time that I was thinking about quitting. So I found myself, I didn't know what to do. So I walked into my guidance counselor's office and talked to him. And he told me, I'll never forget this day. He was like, well, yeah, your coach is going to get mad at you, but I'm the wrestling coach. We'd love to have you on. And I was like, well, wrestling sounds pretty fun. At least it's a little bit more applicable to football. And, I still think that's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, like to join the wrestling team. The lessons that you learn from that sport of perseverance, hard work, confidence, it's astounding. And I think like it's so important, as a boy turning to a man, I think those lessons that you learn in the wrestling mat, you like the sense of community and, having those strong male figures in the room is so important. And, I still am, very thankful for my experience on the wrestling mat.
Yeah.
And then when I went to school, another even thing before that, like my guidance counselor, who was my wrestling coach, was the reason I kind of even got to university, right? I was kind of like on the cusp of being accepted to BU, which is like a really, relatively selective college, but they actually called my guidance counselor and was also my wrestling coach and even asked him like, hey, like, we're on the fence with this guy. Like, do we take him or not? And, my coach, rest in peace, Des, miss you forever. He held it down. He was like, yeah, take this guy. He's going to go far. So have to always thank him for that. That's why, wrestling really got me to where I am today.
That's awesome.
So then I went to school, and then for 4 years, I took a break from grappling. I was, studying athletic training. The people who aren't aware what athletic training is, it's like sports medicine. Couldn't really play a sport because I was busy covering those practices, doing the medical side of things with, football, basketball, soccer, swimming, like everything. So was really good experience, getting to see how the sports performance side of things, the sports medicine. And then when I got into grad school, so this is not what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu starts. We had an assignment in our neuroanatomy class, which was skill acquisition. And the idea was you have to learn a skill. And, some of my classmates, they were doing things like, how to draw, with your left hand, make juggle and all this stuff. One girl was like, I'm going to learn how to swim. Like, that's amazing. But, I was like, hey, you know what? Let's try this jiu-jitsu out. Let's see how this goes. And, I signed up for a membership, a 1-month membership at the local Renzo Gracie Rockland. Shout out to Oscar Jimenez, Alberto, and Joseph. I remember my first day there, went to fundamentals class. They were like, you should stay for the advanced class. And I was like, oh, okay. First day, let's see how this advanced class goes. And yeah, I got cross collar choked to oblivion. Someone put their knee in my neck, but
Sounds right.
my eyes went like this, right? Because, it's like there's a whole new world of grappling. I was taking people down, but I was getting stuck in their guard. I couldn't pass like guard. I didn't even know what a guard was. Couldn't pass their guard. Couldn't pass their half guard. And yeah, but then, summer ended and I went back to Boston and signed up for Gracie. And I signed up for Gracie Baja Boston, which is right next to school, like an 8-minute walk from where I lived at the time. And, never looked back since. I've been training, at least, 3 to 4 times a week. And it's been how it is.
Yeah. Something about jiu-jitsu gets those hooks in you, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So had you never been, were you like a UFC fan or like, any kind of martial arts fan prior to trying that?
So I followed UFC, at the time, I think we were all into like John Jones at the time and watching him. But even my old wrestling club back in the day, it was called Apex Wrestling. They did have like a jiu-jitsu class, but as a high school, I was like zoned in on like this wrestling. I wasn't like, at the time I was like, oh, jiu-jitsu, like maybe like another time, but yeah, I never really thought of it. And even in undergrad and college, I was just so busy with like cause as a student for athletic training, you're at the same time you're taking classwork, you're also doing the clinical aspects. So you're bouncing back and forth. You're going to clinical and then you're going to class. After class, you're going to clinical. You're going on these like trips with the team. Like sometimes they're overnight, like across the country. It's a lot, but it's a great experience. So yeah.
So your doctorate, did you get your doctorate from BU or did I see BC?
It was BU. Yeah, BU. Yeah. I had a rotation in BC working with the basketball team.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's in physical therapy?
Yeah.
Okay. My father was a professor of exercise physiology at Springfield College in Massachusetts. So anytime I hear like PT, I'm like dialed into right away.
Springfield is actually like one of the leading colleges in athletic training. They're legit out there. Yeah.
Yeah. He was very proud to be a part of that faculty there. So yeah. So then how did the Grappling Doc come about?
Yeah. So, I've always been really about I have a big passion for, fitness, injury prevention and, obviously grappling. And then, I would post exercise videos and I would post videos of me just like training at jiu-jitsu on my personal page. But then I thought to myself, like, hey, maybe like I'll start, like a fitness page and, post, like actual content that will, be helpful for the community, like exercise to, strengthen your grips, conditioning wise, injury prevention, that's, stuff that we can all benefit from. And then I started that in November of 2021. And it was very rudimentary at first. If you guys like go to my page, it's literally just exercise videos. And I just post like these long paragraph captions. I don't know if anyone actually reads them or not. Like that's what I learned. You got to like space it out, 5th grade reading level at these points. But that's how it all started out. And then, I have to shout out this group, the Honey Badger Project. It's a collective of clinicians like myself who are trying to work with our target niche. Specifically mine is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes and grapplers. And going through that program, it taught me how to use social media to, leverage my mission, like leverage my voice and kind of really just work with the people I want to work with. And then I was able to use what I learned from there to create content that speaks to, the hearts and souls of other grapplers. So, I believe this is my mission. I'm like trying to deliver content that will benefit the community as a whole, keep us rolling and training until like we literally can't anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think something you said in your introduction about how the jiu-jitsu community, jiu-jitsu athletes are underserved in all of these things that you're trying to do. I think that's spot on. I mean, I think about myself personally and most guys we train with, like everyone you get into jiu-jitsu because A lot of people, it's I need some exercise. It needs to be fun. I like it. And you think that's going to be enough on its own to take care of your body. And it ends up almost being to the detriment. I mean, speaking personally, like I went 10 plus years really without doing any other exercise because it was just all jujitsu. And then suddenly I'm hitting my mid to late 30s and everything starts to fall apart.
Yeah. It's something that I actually learned in PT school, just working with higher level athletes, right? I did a rotation down in Dallas working with some NFL guys and collegiate athletes prepping for the NFL. And you think that these guys would be, they are physical specimen, but you think they'd be like the most healthiest, nothing's wrong with them. They're able to do these crazy things like 360 dunks and all that. But when you take a closer look at it, like you'll see things that are like not moving. Like some of them, they can't squat properly. Some of them, like their feet are like flat, like the flattest feet that I've ever seen. They might be able to do like certain moves, like I said, the 360 dunk, but they can't lunge, and it's because that they've relied on their athleticism so much that, they almost forgot to just cover the basics. And that's kind of the problem with when you do an activity too much, because then you get too used to doing this certain movement pattern over and over and over again that you forget to use. Like I talk about this in my most recent post, like not being able to, for example, in jiu-jitsu, like if you're constantly being bent over and, you work a desk job outside of jiu-jitsu, like, are you going to, when are you going to, stand straight and like, straighten out your posture. Right. So as a physical therapist, my goal is to kind of help promote, just healthy movement and becoming a better mover, not just in jiu-jitsu, but also just in life in general.
Is the lack of like, how do I ask this question? So you think about like a high level athlete, you say like, they could dunk a basketball, they can't squat properly. Is it like the muscle memory, for lack of a better term, that goes away? Or is it just because of like wear and tear from doing, high level athletics for so long and not like taking care to stretch properly, for example? Like what causes that kind of dichotomy between like, I can do this, but I can't do this basic?
So they've just been, a lot of the times, they've been blessed with like genetics that allow them to, like, they don't even consciously think about doing these activities, that they can kind of just automatically do these skills. But what you'll notice sometimes is that, like these guys, like, sorry, I lost my train of thought right there. Because they've been so reliant on doing like complex movement patterns, when they try to do like basic movements, like you try to have them do it really, really slow, and they'll just all of a sudden you'll start seeing like the instabilities, like they'll start shaking, like they won't be able to hold the position, and you're just like, oh, what's that over there? And then, as a result of being, for example, some of the NFL athletes that I've worked with, they've been so athletic and they're so explosive, their tendons on their legs are so tight that like if you touch it and you try to massage it out, it's like a rock.
Wow.
And and it's like, and at a certain point, it's almost like now in the higher level sports with higher level activity, like, do we try to, fix this and potentially, like stop any problems in the future, but at the cost of detriment to their performance, because they rely on this stiffness now? It's kind of like a sliding scale almost at that point, especially not in the extremes of performance right there. But, with the general population, that's not the way. Like we want to be fluent in all ranges of motion for us to be healthy.
Yeah, you said.
Something I really like that I see you posting are your warm-up routines, your stretches, and all of that, because I mean, that's something personally, it's always on my to-do list of things to get better at, and I'm going to start bookmarking some of your posts, and I don't know if I have to like set an alert on my phone or something to make me do it when I get here, because my routine is I show up, I teach classes, so everyone else is all warmed up, then it's time to do live drills or rolls. I'm just like, cool, I'll just jump right in. Everyone else is warmed up and ready to go, and I'm just completely cold, and I dive right in. And I mean, sometimes I suffer the consequences of it too. So that's always on my 100%. Mind. And I think that's a super relevant and important thing that you're putting out there for people.
Yeah. How, I have two questions. So one would be like, do you, like when you go to train, like when you went to train today, do you go through a specific routine? Do you try to shake it up? Like what's your approach to getting your body ready to, have some extreme contact like that?
Great question. 100%. Every single time I practice, I always warm up. You can ask my teammates. Like I'm always there 15, 20 minutes early. Got to do something, right? So my personal routine it's based for me. So everyone's going to be a little different. For example, if you have any nagging injuries, or if you know that you have some issues in your body, like you probably want to address those beforehand. So for me, for an example, just from the years of like wrestling and jujitsu and all that, I've had some shoulder injuries in my shoulders. So I'm sure many of us have shoulder injuries as a result, getting armbar Kimura and all that. So I always do any like shoulder mobility exercises, for what I always start off is like just a prayer stretch, or like the, arms over your head to stretch out. And then I do kind of an active stretch into that, like the high plank to downward dog. That's a great one to kind of load your arms while it's overhead. If you're not familiar with that, I actually post that in my reel on Instagram. You guys can go check that out. And then from there, I do a lot of just general shoulder stability exercises. I actually talked about this in one of my posts. You want to jiu-jitsu, right? There's your shoulder has to be strong when you're in the air, kind of like fighting for grips, and also strong on the ground when you're posting on the ground. So when you're doing like technical stand-ups, when you're kind of framing on an opponent. So you want to expose your shoulder to that before, training. So I'll do stuff, shoulder taps, high planks to high side planks. Side planks is great. And then some banded exercises, like those like standard PTX banded exercises where you're pulling a band over the head, external rotations. Those are great. And then another thing that I believe is really important is also hip mobility, right? Having flexible and strong hips is huge in jiu-jitsu. Being able to, retain guard, swing your legs over other people's bodies. So I do a lot of hip mobility, shin box get-ups. Those are huge. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's pretty much like S-mount, but then you bridge your hips up forward. Those are great. And then I also do this movement called like the kettlebell weight shift. Without a kettlebell, you just kind of bring your hips over to the side while bringing your hips forward. Frog stretch. And then if I have time, I'll do like some kind of like we call this in like the performance of like cars, controlled articular rotations. It's just a fancy way of saying you just bring your leg out to the side and bring it back in. But yeah, again, this is what I do. And like I said, I think people should have their own kind of individualized plan that kind of addresses what their issues are before they train. Because you want to get those muscles and tissues active, because I know for a fact if I don't get my shoulder warmed up and I like go for a shot or someone collar drags me, like I'm in for a rough ride. I'm going to feel something in my shoulder.
Yeah. So yes, I'm one of those people who've had shoulder injuries, right? This is years ago at this point, but I was getting taken down, posted on my shoulder subluxed, and then, popped back in. And then shortly after that, it was like a sequence, right? So he took me down, I posted, it subluxed, he caught my arm and armbarred me.
Oh,
right?
Man. Double whammy.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And in the process, I tore my pec, right? But I tell that story because obviously I had surgery to repair it, and then I had, however long of PT. And I always thought to myself, like, oh, I'm going to continue to do these shoulder mobility and strengthening drills forever, right? Because my shoulders felt great. I mean, this shoulder took a really long time to ever get to feel like it did pre-injury, and even today it still gets wonky sometimes, right? But I always thought like, oh, I'll do these exercises forever, right? Because they were just I felt so good doing them, and then of course it fell off, and I've never done them since, right?
Look at all the exercises we have written on the board up there.
Yes, right.
I wrote out a 4-day routine all on the big whiteboard. Jeff and I were going to start meeting up and doing it twice a week, and we haven't done it 0 times.
Yeah. So do you like how does someone go about getting into like a specialized routine like you're talking about, right? So what you described to me is like fitting, could be potentially fitting for me, right? I have shitty shoulders, I'm old, I have bad hips. Like, so for me, if you were to ask me like, hey, what would you want to work on? I would talk about strengthening my mobility in my hips and my shoulders, right?
Yeah.
But like, what is the process that you use, especially for someone who is grappling, right? Whether it's jiu-jitsu or wrestling, like, do you have like a certain process that you go through, or is that secret sauce you don't want to share?
No, that's totally fine. I think this is just how it, like, I think advice to the grappling community in general. If you are feeling aches and pains, don't go on YouTube and Instagram and try to like pick these exercises for you, right? It's like the same exact thing with us kind of going on Instagram being like, oh, this move could be a good fit for my game. But honestly, the best thing would be to do, talk to your coach, talk to your professor who's like knows what you should work on. Same thing when you have aches and pains, right? You got to go get it assessed by a healthcare professional. Like I don't, even if you aren't looking to stay in physical therapy for that long, or even if you have like a personal trainer that you have that that knows a bunch of exercises, go get it evaled by a trained healthcare professional, athletic trainer, physical therapist, chiropractors, because they will know what the hell is going on up in your shoulder, right? You don't want to, for example, if you have shoulder pain and you find these exercises on Instagram, like, oh, do the banded work and all this, but it turns out you have bursitis. You just made your shoulder worse, man. So
yeah,
that's the biggest thing I would say first is go get it eval. And the second is to kind of stay on top of these exercises, set yourself like an alarm notification, or, make it like a habit. There's a great book called Atomic Habits. Really, I'm sure if you guys read that, habit stacking,
Yep.
If your habit is already going to jiu-jitsu, try to stack, doing exercise, just going to jiu-jitsu beforehand. So like for my guys that I work with, I mean, it's all programmed for them, and they get notifications on their phones like when they have to do these exercises, and I can see if they don't do their exercises or not. So I kind of call them out on it if I notice that they've been skipping a lot. And most of the time they're like, "Oh, sorry, Kenny, I just didn't like log it in." But even then, it's like, please, log it in for me. Show me that you've been doing your exercise, because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get you better for training.
Yeah. Are you specifically working with grapplers only, or do you have like practice outside of that?
So up until July 1st, I was in an outpatient orthopedic clinic in Upper East Side, New York City. And then starting July 1st, I've been just working with grapplers full time.
Awesome,
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It, yeah.
That's very, very cool. Very,
Yeah.
very cool. Good for you.
Thank
I do
you.
think it's funny because I don't know whether it's like a martial artist thing. I've never done anything other than jujitsu. And maybe it's like the ties between jujitsu and mixed martial arts, but I do feel like there's a certain level of ego involved in like just work through your pain, right? Just work through it. You twisted your ankle or you blew your knee out. I'm here the next day, right? And
Yeah.
like, do you see that? Like, do you come across that? Do you have to fight that, or do you have to combat that response from people, especially in this type of environment?
100%. When this happens all the time where you see people in training and they get hurt, and then I'm like, oh, and I usually am like the guy at the gym when someone gets hurt, they're like, oh, Kenny, come over here, like quickly take a look at this, and and I don't mind doing that, because like my background as an athletic trainer, like that's what I did. I saw someone fall on the field, I had to run onto the field and quickly look. It was rugby, I'd be dodging people to run onto the field. Yeah, but I don't mind coming in, taking a quick look, making like a quick, just like a triage, what to do. But there's times where I've seen people like pop their knees and they come back in the next day and they train. It's like I try to educate them as much as they can, like go get this checked out. But if they're only going to listen so much. But like I'll tell you guys this though, and there's a difference between training hurt and there's a difference between training injured, right? If you're like hurt and you're like a little sore, like that's fine. Like we're all we all have bumps and bruises. I'm not invincible. I have shoulder aches and pains. But if you're actually injured where like it's taking your mind off training and you're like, worried about it, that's a little different, right? And there's really no point of you trying to go train 100%, get yourself even more injured. And then, now you can't even walk anymore, or you can't even lift your arm up to like, zip up your jacket without any kind of pain. Now you're really screwed, so.
Just got me thinking about my ever increasing wrist pain I've been having lately that I haven't had checked out.
Yeah.
There was a period where you're both like, oh, our wrists hurt. Like mine actually went away.
Mine
so
just
now,
hasn't gone. It's just gotten worse.
Yeah.
Should probably check it out. But I was going to say, it is very interesting how, we seek out professional instruction for our jiu-jitsu. And if you have anyone that's telling you that they're learning from somewhere other than like a professional, legit jiu-jitsu academy, you're like, that's bad. You can't learn from them. But then at the same time, we want to go lift weights, and we're like, well, I don't need to pay someone to show me how to lift weights. I just know how to lift weights. And
Yeah.
we get injured,
Yeah.
and we're just like, well, I'm not going to a physical therapist. That's just going to cost money. I can do the exercises on my own. It's just it's so ironic that jiu-jitsu people are generally like so strongly on both sides of that equation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's like
I
you
definitely
have to go to the professional, but I'm not going to the
Yeah,
professional.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a growing community of, physical therapists that also train like myself. And we're really trying really hard to promote, this message of, please go get your exercise, go get your shoulders checked out. Don't rehab your shoulder using Instagram exercises. And, the issue is even with Instagram, as I'm not going to specifically name these accounts, but I follow some accounts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and these people, they aren't healthcare professionals, and they're talking about like how to alleviate pain in these, and I'm like, they're like, oh, do this banded exercise if you have shoulder pain, or do this exercise if you have pain. And it's like, you can't just say this because it's too broad. Like I kind of mentioned with the example with the bursitis in the shoulder. If you do exercises for that are directly targeting the shoulder tendons, you're just going to make it worse. Mm-hmm. Or, I saw that I saw this. I'll name what happened in the video. It was like this banded mobility exercise where you take like one of those like assisted pull-up bands and you put it around your shoulder to like stretch your shoulder out. Man, if you have instability in your shoulder, that's just going to make your shoulder worse. It's just pulling it apart even more. Like, you don't need mobility. You need to stabilize it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that I've always I wouldn't say I've always been concerned about, right? I've been injured, 3 times probably in my jiu-jitsu career at this point. And, when I tell people, like when I, injured my shoulder, I tore some tendons in my, or some ligaments in my knee or whatever. And I try to tell them like what it is, how it happened, right? Or what it is that I do. I never really have confidence that like my doctor knows what the hell I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or like, my orthopedist knows what I'm talking about. Hopefully now, like, it's probably better than it was even, 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh, and then they're like, well, you're just not going to go do that anymore, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. They just assume they don't know that it's an addiction that we can't get it
off,
right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, no, just get me better so I can do more of it, not stop me. But I always worry about that. Like, do they even know, like, what I mean when I say jiu-jitsu and, like, what that wear and tear is to my body? I know we have someone in common between us who we wonder about the same thing, but, like, I never know. So it, like, makes me happy to hear, like, that there's a community, however small now, but big in the future, that really has a better understanding of what that is, because it's different than football, right? Which everybody has grown up seeing.
Yep.
It's a couple of years ago at this point. I was rolling here just on an open mat, and I twisted my leg, and my opponent had my partner had my foot, and we just heard like pop, 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 and I could walk. My knee never like really, really swelled up, but it just felt really uncomfortable. So I went to the doctor, and he said, I forget honestly what the exact issue was, but some small like support tendons, I guess, or ligaments. And he said, the only time we've ever really seen this injury is when someone gets hit from the side in the knee in football.
Yeah.
Right. And which is fine, but I like didn't really have any confidence that like they would tell me what to do with it for jiu-jitsu, and maybe it's the same thing. But, there's just not a lot of, it's not common enough where people are going to say like, oh yeah, okay, I know what you're doing. I know what you're putting your body through, and you've got to get back to that level of strength and mobility, to go back to doing that,
Yeah, so. I completely understand. And I think I'm going to add to that. The fact that, a lot of doctors don't understand, like you said, kind of our addiction to the sport, right? Well, like, I think what's amazing is like the perseverance of grapplers. We'll do anything to get back to it, right? Like anything. So when you tell someone you can't do this anymore, like stop doing this, immediately their buy into you as a clinician and a provider, they're not going to listen to you anymore at all. Like you just said, like the worst thing you could possibly say to them, you're going to stop doing this. Yeah. Immediately it's going to go in one ear, out the other ear. I'm going to go find another doctor.
I'm going to go train tomorrow.
I'll be back in the mats, right?
Even in spite, right? And so my advice to any grapplers who are in this situation, who don't know if they like, oh, they have this belief that they go see a doctor to tell them to stop training, go see like a sports medicine doctor, or, go like, that at least they will have the experience, of covering athletics. They'll understand what an athlete, the desire to get back to playing sports. They will be generally a little bit more recommending you to go to physical therapy rather than rest. I'm going to talk about that in a bit, how rest is usually never the answer to after injury as well. Oh. Yeah.
All right, let's get
Should I go into that?
Yeah, let's get into that. Yeah,
okay.
That piqued my interest.
Yeah. So, there's actually two, I'm talking about two theories right now in terms of tissue healing. So the first one is Wolff's Law, which is the idea that bones heal in response to the stress that they get. So, obviously when you fracture a bone, you're in a cast, but then after that, you're in a walking boot, right? So you're never the only time you're resting is in the first kind of like that first 3 months or so to let everything heal, right? And after that, you have to gradually load it. and have it respond to that stress in order to build the tissue. And the same thing is you can say for Davis's law, which is for actual tissue, tendons, ligaments, and all that. So when people get hurt, and you hear this all the time, oh, I hurt my shoulder, I rested for 2 weeks, came back, it hurts again. It doesn't really, nothing really, you didn't do anything to change it. You may have taken away the stimulus that caused the pain, but you didn't do anything to strengthen it. You didn't do anything to mobilize it. You didn't do anything to change the actual tissue structure. So general complete rest is like never recommended. Even in the hospital setting, like I did a rotation in acute care of stroke patients, we still have them near death, have them sit up, roll in bed, have them sit up, because it's just being complete bed rest is so bad for you. Like it's terrible for your, first of all, you're just consciousness, and you're just your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, and everything. So, what I kind of tell my guys is when they immediately get an injury is the first thing you should focus on is just kind of just move the joint if you can, like get that mobility back. That's the biggest thing. Like don't even think about training right now, because you're not gonna be able to train it. If it's the point where it's like limiting your ability to walk and such, you just got to get it moving. And then, once you can start tolerating a little bit of resistance on it and you can do some exercise, like start doing some easy exercise, like, like some air squats without weight, or just like some static holds. And then, once that clears and you can walk around with no pain, it's time to start aggressively strengthening it and getting you back to return to sport. It's the issue when guys kind of, skip steps when they get hurt. It's like, oh, I feel fine. They jump right back into their sport full fledged, didn't, taking the time off, they've lost kind of all of this, the strength, the stamina, and they push themselves to the limit again. And that's where, when the demands of the sport or your activity is higher than what your body's capable of doing, is when you get injury. So, and I think that's the cool thing about sports physical therapy is, there's really, if you have the experience of being like a personal trainer and a sports physical therapist, they're really, if you look at it, there's really no difference, honestly. Like I, programmed, I give an example. I programmed, worked with one of my guys who is now actually the newest Henzo Gracie black belt. He had a torn meniscus, and once he was able to walk with no pain, I was hitting him, smashing him with squats, lunges, single leg squats, step ups, like lateral squats, lateral lunges, planks, and all this to get him ready to get him ready back to the sport. So if you go to physical therapy and you're doing the same damn thing over and again, step ups, step downs, the same exercise like grandma across the table doing the same thing, you got to get out of there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never would have, because you always think like, I don't know, I always think like, oh, I got arrested for 2 weeks, and then if it doesn't hurt as I'm moving it, I can go right back to doing what I was doing, right? Like it never really, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Talk to the grappling doc. He's gonna tell you absolutely not.
Are you on for fresh injuries? Are you on team ice or team no ice? Seems to be some controversy out there.
Great question. So we can talk about that. So when I was an athletic training student, directly working with sports, we use a lot of ice after practice. And I am on the viewpoint where if you have an injury, ice is not really going to do much. We want that actual inflammation to occur, because that's when healing happens. So, there's like studies that like say like, oh, potentially ice can delay that inflammation. So they've actually taken away that protocol, that which is called RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevate. They've gone away with that. And now they do peace and love. I want to say, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like protect, compress, elevate, but like load, get it moving. Like you want to get it moving as soon as you can, without, to a certain extent, right? You don't want to cause more damage to it, but you want to keep it moving. But in athletic training, when the people aren't injured, like for example, when I work with volleyball guys, like I remember this making like 30 bags of ice for their knees when they, after practice and doing that. And, with that, it's if it makes them feel better, so be it, at that point, it's really not going to do anything. It's not really going to actually elicit, tissue changes, but it makes them feel better so that they can, spend the night without any discomfort and come back the next day. Yeah, let's do it.
So pain management, not necessarily injury recovery.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah,
exactly. Pain management.
How about like, I have two questions, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is there particular injuries that you see more often in jiu-jitsu that could be prevented? And I don't mean like I got armbarred and I didn't tap, right? I mean, that's obviously, we know the solution of that type of injury. But are there other injuries that you see that's like you would attribute to more of a lack of preparation than others?
I guess you can kind of go on the lack of warming up, right? So, Like for example, most people, I would say if you work at desk job, you probably have really, really stiff hips, right? And this is something interesting. There's a there's a system kind of where we kind of break down the body by joints and kind of determine the role of those joints by either mobile or stable. So, for example, your hips, they should generally be rather mobile. And your knee should be relatively stable and your ankle should be relatively mobile. So the idea is if one joint is not doing its role, your body's smart and it will figure it out how to do like movements. But as a result, let's say if your hip isn't mobile, the body's gonna be like, oh, let's take that mobility and put it in your low back. And that's when you start to get issues. Or let's take that mobility and like put it in the knee. And the knee's supposed to be a stable joint, so is the low back. And that's when you can start to potentially get, injuries and pain. So, especially for jiu-jitsu guys, I would say, because we have, with our sport, all those like demands on our knees, knee cutting, heel hooks and all that. So you probably want to work on some hip mobility. That's for sure. Hip mobility and ankle mobility are huge and kind of keeping your knee healthy, right? Knees over toe guys, like having the knees over toes. In order to do that, you got to have good ankle mobility.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We usually like to ask we have a couple of like canned questions that we like to ask all of our guests, but before we do that, do you have other pointers, advice, things you want to educate us on? I feel like he's very prepared. Like he's got notes in front of him.
You guys did a great job just kind of going with the things I want to talk about, like, the injury management and such like that.
I guess all that stuff is so relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess what I could do is kind of break down one thing, kind of like a little bit more clear, like a return to sport kind of model of once you get injured. So when you injure a tissue, there's 3 phases of healing. There's the acute phase, which is like the first week or so. And then there's the proliferative phase, which goes on for about 3 to 4 weeks or so. And then you have the remodeling phase, which is anywhere from like 4 weeks to 12 weeks, sometimes even 2 years. So I think I touched on this briefly, but in the acute phase, you want to focus on just range of motion, just getting that knee moving or, that shoulder moving again. Practice, don't really think about that, right? You like just focus on, carrying out your activities of life, right? You can't walk. Like, how are you going to get to work? How are you going to, go up and down the stairs? Just try to figure that out. If you can get to practice, just watch, man. Just sit out there, sit out, watch. There's studies have been showing that mental practice is a real thing. Being able to determine if you watch that white belt mess up, being able to determine, okay, what he's doing wrong. You can watch your professor roll and be like, oh, he's doing that, which is cool. Those are been shown to actually help with learning. After that, there's the proliferative phase. Now tissue's being laid down to heal, and pain's probably a lot better at this point, and you feel pretty good, but you're not 100%. So this is the time when you can start to load it and do some resistance exercises. Body weight, squats, holds, such like that to tolerance. And then once you get to that 8 to 12 week mark where tissue tends to be relatively healed, this is where you can kind of go to practice and try, the drilling portion, try the technique. And for the live rounds, I generally tell my guys, maybe go 1 live round, take a round off because you're still recovering because you haven't had that. Your endurance is probably not up to par at this point if you've been taking this time off. Then go around again, take your time off, go around again, because we can always build up. But if you get hurt, it just sets us back. So we always try to build up.
Awesome. That's amazing advice.
Yeah, that's really, very, very cool.
Like you said, everyone's always rushing back. And I get it. I get why everyone wants to rush back, but you got to think long term.
Well, we have such like we love, I think if you're here, right, you love the physical activity, but you also like love your brothers and sisters that you're with, right? And it's like it's
the community aspect.
Yeah,
it's the social thing. Yeah,
so it makes it hard.
I'm huge on the show up and watch.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you've definitely said that to our folks. I've come in hurt. Like, all right, I'm going to get mental reps in today, and it is nice to know, like, when you're sitting there. To Kay's point, like, you can see, like, oh, I see what Pat did there to him, right? Or I see, like, what the mistake was there. It's like kind of just reaffirms your own skills. Maybe you can't put them to use right away, right? But at least you can.
The mental game. Jiu-jitsu is so mental. Like, at least, like, doing wrestling and compared to jiu-jitsu, like, wrestling is mostly instinct right there. You're just acting on, like, what you can do. But jiu-jitsu, you can, it's if you can technique your guy and if you can outsmart your guy, you can win. You can lay a trap. That's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
What's your training look like these days? How much are you on the mats?
So I get to try to train at least 3 to 4 times a week. Generally it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Recently with my, since I've kind of gone to this full time and adding the Monday schedule in, I guess I'm proud to say it. I love no-gi. I'm a no-gi guy, but I grudgingly put on the gi because it's how it is. And what's great is that my Tuesday, Thursday schedule, Tuesday, it's both gi and no-gi. It's gi fundamentals and then no-gi after. So I get the best of both worlds. My Monday is my tough gi day. A lot of the higher belts show up and I get the tough gi rolls, and Saturdays are competition class. And that's always tough in gi. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great that you can get it in. So when people ask you what you do, I'm assuming, even though they may not know the intricacies of what a physical therapist may do, most people can understand when you say that, right? But when you say that you work with jiu-jitsu athletes, what do they say? Do they?
It either goes two ways. They either watch UFC because UFC's exploded at this point, and they have an idea of jiu-jitsu, and they're just like, "Oh, that's so cool," or they're like, "Karate? Like, what is that?" And then at that point, and then I have to kind of make a judgment in my head whether it's not worth my time to explain to them what jiu-jitsu is and all that. And then I try like, "Oh, are you familiar with wrestling?" And they're like, "Yeah, like." Is that where they wear like, tights? And then, but I hear that, then I try it, and I'm just kind of like, all right, well, I just work
therapist.
with you.
Yeah. We ask everybody that question, and we get a variety of answers, whether it's like Pat and I who kind of try to duck away from the question overall, or I had an old coach who said, like, when they ask him if he can kick their ass, he just says yes, right? So we've been all over the map with that.
Very direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask him the other question?
Yeah. We always like to ask our guests what their choice of walkout music would be. And maybe, I don't know if you've had matches where you had walkout music, or it might just be theoretical, but where are you at with that?
Yeah, so I'll give you guys my high school wrestling walkout song. Not very PG-13, the title. It was called "Android Porn" by Craddy. It's a very hype, epic electronic music song. Right now, I would say, I'm feeling the Brooklyn vibe. I'm probably gonna play some Pop Smoke. You know,
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yep.
Probably play some Pop Smoke. Maybe "Element" by Pop Smoke would be my walkout song right now.
So we have a Spotify playlist that has all of our guests' music on it. So I'll once we publish your podcast, we'll get. Well, I post it here and there, like not every week, but we'll get that playlist out for everybody to see. We like to sometimes we'll put it on when we're rolling or training, and we just kind of go through everybody's music. So we'll add you to that. We've had quite a wide variety. Wide variety. Thank you, of music from Leonard Cohen, like dark, slow, where we skip the music when it comes on in the gym.
Whitney Houston.
Yeah, Whitney Houston. That's right. We have Whitney Houston.
Well,
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. So yeah.
Now, my question to you guys, is it only one song limit, or am I allowed to add two, or do you guys pick a strict one song limit?
We've had two for some people. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Usually people can't come up with something. They come up with one, but you got two in your back pocket. So that was.
Yeah. We'll throw them on there.
Yeah. Or some people have like competed multiple times in the times that we've interviewed them, right? So we've added like, a couple of variations of songs for them. So yeah, Android Porn and Pop Smoke. What was it? What was the track?
Element.
All right. I won't forget Android Porn. I don't even have to worry about writing that one down.
Yeah.
So if people want to find you, follow you, get in touch to work with you, how do they do that?
For sure. So if anyone is listening, interested in learning more what I do, and wants to stay up to date on my content, I'm mainly on Instagram, and I'm at grappling_doc.
Awesome. And we'll publish all this in the show notes and YouTube description, all that too. So they'll be able to link right to you.
Absolutely. I didn't ask you this to begin with, but are you originally from New York? Where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm originally from, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rockland County. It's a little bit upstate, the 845 Lower Hudson Valley. Grew up there, wrestled there. Really strong wrestling community there. And I'm always, that's where I got into my love of grappling. And I'm very thankful for that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Any other questions we should peg them with?
No, that was an information-filled podcast. I loved it.
Yeah,
Great
me
stuff.
too. Absolutely awesome. Thank you, man. Very
No
appreciate
problem.
it. We've been talking about scheduling this now for like a while, so it's awesome to finally meet you and suck some of your knowledge out of you. And of
course,
when you're in the Western Massachusetts area and you're ready to get some of that no-gi action, you can always swing by.
Of course.
Yeah.
And if you guys are ever in the Brooklyn area, come by to the dojo, man. Like, we'd love to have you guys over. Like,
awesome.
we have a very open kind of guest policy. Just anyone can hop in and train. Come by.
Awesome,
man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
No problem.
Thanks.
Take it easy, guys.
See ya.